The battle to become the Tory mayoral candidate is down to a short list of 3. About 20,000 London Conservatives will vote next month on who they want to take on Sadiq Khan next May in the battle for City Hall. I'm joined by one of the 3, Dan Korski. Dan, thank you for coming into the Evening Standard.
Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure. The first question is an obvious one in a way. Who are you and why should Londoners vote for you as London Mayor?
I'm a technology entrepreneur, I'm a businessman, I'm somebody who's built businesses here and overseas and created hundreds of jobs for Londoners. But I also have experience from government. 7 years ago, I worked for David Cameron in government. And I've got experience from community work because I've worked very hard in my community, both the Jewish community from where I come, but also London's broader community, building civic organizations. So I'm a businessman, I'm someone with politics in my background and government experience. I'm bringing all that together. And I think Londoners should vote for me if they get the chance, because I'm offering a return to what I'm calling the London dream, this idea that we can live in a fantastic city, and I'm going to bring a sort of positive aspirational vision to how we can get back to that London dream, which for too many people has just become too hard to live. And the story really is my own. I came to the city to live the London dream, and I want more people to do so too.
Can you tell us a bit about your personal backstory, where you were born, when you came to London, what you've been doing since you worked in Downing Street?
For sure. I was born in Denmark, but I'm really of Polish heritage. My parents were kicked out of communist Poland back in the 60s, and I eventually came here in 97. And the reason I came here was I was taken on a trip when I was 10 years old, and I was just so overawed by the city of London, and I just knew I needed to live in London. I only wanted to be a Londoner, and it took me a while until I had the right to decide for myself. And then I came here in 97, and I just found myself a home in a way that I haven't found a home anywhere else. And so, that's really my story. I'm an immigrant, I'm a child of refugees, and in that way I think I'm a 21st century Londoner. I am what London is today, I sound like what London is today, digital native, entrepreneur, immigrant, and that's really kind of how best to describe me. And you say, well, what did you do? I left Downing Street 7 years ago, and I just had this itch to build businesses. What's so fantastic in this city is if you have an idea, you can very quickly get money together, great people to coalesce around you, and you'll get a shot at building a product or a service that people really want. And that's what I went off and I've been doing for the last 7 years.
To move on to the sort of policies that you've announced so far, one that you've said is that in terms of the ULEZ expansion, you would cancel that. But interestingly as well, you've also raised the thought of sort of moving to a sort of paper mile road charging system. Can you explain a bit more why you think that would be a good idea?
Now, first of all, let's start with ULEZ. ULEZ, the extension absolutely has to be junked. And the reason is very simple. It's a money-making initiative. It isn't intended to really clean the air or address CO2 emissions. There's a tiny proportion of diesel cars on the roads. They'll basically get off the road in the next couple of years anyway. And the number is so small that it's simply not credible to believe that it has a massive impact on health in the city. What putting the ULEZ extension down will definitely have an impact on is, household budgets. And if you are, a hardworking family, reliant on your car, having to drive in and out of the city, you might have to spend £1,000 a year in order to drive in. And that may be driving your elderly parents to the GP, or yourself to work, or your kids along with you down to the Aldi in order to shop. So it's inequitous and unreasonable, and so we have to junk the extension.
But just on that point, though, it's surely not unreasonable for other Londoners to expect the right to breathe clean air, though, is it?
Absolutely, and I always say I want a green, livable city. I've got kids in the city, I live in the city, and I want this to be a green, livable city.
The question: why should essentially drivers from the suburbs be able to drive old bangers, as we would have called them in the old days, into town?
Let's focus on the question, which is how do we clean the air? How do we use a limited amount of money in order to have the greatest impact? I'm a businessman. You don't have unlimited amount of money. You have to ask yourself, how do I get the furthest with the smallest amount of money? Then we don't have to raise taxes, then we don't have to burden people. And the answer to that is, if you want to clean up the air in the city, let's clean up the tube air, which is far more polluted than anything above ground. Let's clean up construction sites where diesel generators are creating a much bigger air pollution problem than cars. And let us not burden people who have to drive in. Let me give you an example. 1.5% of all buses, London buses, are electrified, right? So here, yes, so here is a great example where the bus system, which is totally in the power of the mayor, hasn't been electrified. Well, why don't we start there? If you're really concerned about car emissions, over time, people are going to get rid of their bangers anyway. There's absolutely, ample evidence that over the next couple of years, people are going to get rid of that. And by the way, those bangers represent a tiny, 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 tiny proportion of all the emissions. So let's go back to the question, do we have the right to live in a city with clean air? Absolutely. Let's figure out what the best, most cost-efficient way of achieving that result fast.
Okay. Now, we'll know by the middle of July whether you're the rider who crosses the finish line first. How would you rate your chances?
Look, I think my chances are good. The bookies are saying that I'm the new favourite. But at the end of the day, it's down to the Conservative Party and its members, and I'm going to be pitching to them as hard as I can over the next couple of weeks to show that I have the energy, the ideas, the dynamism that can win the city and win over Sadiq Khan. And I'm hopeful, but I take nothing for granted, and we'll fight for every voter.
And just finally, if you do win this election, you then have the challenge of defeating Sadiq Khan. You will have to appeal to many Londoners beyond the Tory heartlands to have a chance of actually coming first there in that race. Any chance, surely, does London really want a Tory?
I think that this city is tired of Sadiq Khan. They think he's mismanaged the city, and they're really disappointed. They're disappointed in his mismanagement. They want a different kind of politics. They want a different kind of leadership in City Hall. And I don't think that is something to do with party colour or where they live in the city. They want something different. They want somebody to restore this London dream that I've talked about. And they want somebody who has the track record and ideally hasn't been tainted by London politics to come and fix it. And I think I'm the right person to do that.
Dan Korski, thank you very much for speaking to the Evening Standard.
Thank you very much for having me.